So we'll jump ahead a little bit. We had two areas that we wanted to look at with this month in our CAC, and some of these are topics we talked about in our February workshop, which was the last one we had before we went into electronic meetings. So we'll focus on two areas. They are Whitegate Farm, which is out on 3 Notch Road by Wickham Pond, and a Greenspace area near Brownsville. So I'll just start off with Whitegate Farm, and for each of these projects, I'll just share a little bit of information about why we're looking at this, kind of the current conditions on that site, some of the opportunities that have come up through the master plan process that we've talked about, other priorities we've heard, and then some potential alternatives that as staff we've explored a little bit, and we can talk more a little bit about the end of just what other information do you need to feel like you can choose an alternative or make a recommendation to staff about this. So this property is Whitegate Farm. It is out on 3 Notch Road between Wickham Pond, which is the area shown in green on this map. It's a little gray rural area zone parcel, kind of in the dotted box area. We received a request from the owners of this property early on in the process. I know Supervisor Malik and I met with the owners who are selling out the estate on that property. They asked us to take a look at the designation. They were unaware it was what is current designation in the 2010 master plan, and asked us to take a look at that and bring that forward through the community process. The parcel is about 12 acres, currently zoned RA rural areas. Means it probably have about 5 development rights on it in theory. I haven't checked that, but it'd probably be in that range. Kind of an oddity within most of our development areas. In the 2010 master plan, this property was designated as Greenspace. And the reason stated in the master plan at the text is really that it was intended to remain rural and undeveloped, help break up the appearance of development along 3 Notch Road. So it's kind of sandwiched between Wickham Pond, that development there, and then Park Ridge Drive and some of the clinic, the self-storage, and the daycare that are just near that property. So it is kind of this undeveloped parcel in our development areas, right on the edge there. So in February, in response to the feedback we'd heard, the request from the property owners, we did ask about this property with the Eastern Crozet group at that workshop. We did hear some support from the workshop attendees about bumping it up to an urban density residential 6 to 12 units per acre designation, which is part of what's in Wickham Pond currently, some of the townhouse portions. Some of the benefits they felt were that there could be improved sidewalks and connections between Wickham Pond and Western Ridge. Again, there is kind of a break in the development between Wickham Pond and Highlands and the rest of Crozet. And this parcel is sort of in the middle of that. So they felt there could be some opportunities there. We did an online feedback form as well and have some differing responses. About half of the participants felt a neighborhood density, 3 to 6 units per acre, single family designation was more appropriate. About a third didn't feel a change was necessary, and others felt that neighborhood mixed use or this urban density designation would be more appropriate. So there's not a lot of consistency in the feedback we received there, and that's kind of why we're bringing it out to you all for your feedback at a future time. I think some staff comments based on what we've heard so far in the process. I think what we see as opportunities based on the neighborhood model that is in the County's comprehensive plan. We could see this being a logical extension of Wickham Pond, continuing that same mix of housing types, which are single-family detached townhouses, and there are some other kind of accessory apartments and other types in there. There is some currently approved retail and office space, very small scale approved with part of Wickham Pond nearby. That's not been developed yet. That's kind of the undeveloped portion that fronts on 3 Notch Road. Building on the connectivity concerns we heard, we felt that there could be an opportunity to connect Wickham Way through this site, provide new bicycle and pedestrian connections to Wickham Pond, and potentially the Highlands, which is something we've heard about. We know that the Crozet Connect service currently comes through there. It comes off Park Ridge Drive, comes onto 3 Notch Road, loops back in through the subdivision. Building a bit more direct connection could save some time, improve transit service through there. We could preserve the existing stream buffer and the hedgerow at the front of the property as well. So just a couple of high-level notes, I think, opportunities we saw there when we were evaluating potential alternatives. We came up with one alternative was to Continue the same pattern we saw with Wickham Pond, with maintaining the hedgerow on the front of the property, a buffer back from 3-notch road. Designate about half the property as this urban density, 6 to 12 units per acre type, more of a townhouse scale, and leave the rear half as more of this neighborhood density single family area. Again, preserve that visual buffer that was called for in the 2010 plan, maintain the stream buffer, and we would also adjust the adjoining area, which is currently shown as light industrial, which includes the daycare and part of the light industrial zone area east of Park Ridge. And the reason for that being that in the past, this kind of green area might have acted as a buffer from other residential area. We feel that it wouldn't be ideal to have industrial uses directly next to this under the current zoning or the potential future land use. We felt that Park Ridge Drive could be a good separation there. And the line would kind of follow an extension of Wickham Way to connect to Park Ridge and build out a street grid through there. The other alternative, based on I think some of the other feedback, which is neighborhood density residential, which is also consistent with the nearby properties, preserving the same environmental characteristics we discussed earlier. So just a side-by-side view. Part of it be more urban density, more dense towards the front, but you would have the buffer with a more single-family detached product in the rear potentially if it is redeveloped. An alternative B is just more of that one type of single-family detached choice in there. Alternative C is that we retain it as currently as Parks and Green Systems as it already is. I'll just note that staff recommends, I think, alternative A. We've heard a lot about housing choice throughout this process. We've heard positive responses to Wickham Pond. We think that it could develop in a similar pattern, be a cohesive development with a kind of around that existing center at Wickham Pond. And I think next time we'd like to discuss a little bit more about these alternatives, potential trade-offs with the residential densities proposed, and we can put out a feedback form later on to get some initial questions and thoughts from you all and bring that for discussion next time. But we did have support generally for a residential designation on this property. It's just a question, I think, of at what density at this time. So that's the Whitegate Farm property. We'll talk about that next meeting. The other area we want to talk about is out towards 250, the intersection of Crozet Avenue and Route 250, out towards Brownsville. We've had a couple requests. Again, the last property we talked about was designated entirely as green space in the 2010 master plan. We've heard concerns about other properties in the area, and I think we wanted to check in about that practice. Designating these properties entirely as green space kind of conflicts with the existing by right potential that in some ways we feel that it sets an expectation that this property area will remain preserved and undeveloped forever. But we acknowledge that these are applying to areas which do have some development currently. And that's not really been our practice in most other master plans. We use this designation to call out public parks, HOA common areas, and other environmental features. So I think we noted a conflict there, and we want to bring that up for discussion. This area, kind of in this dotted box, is currently zone R1 residential, basically 1 to 1.5 dwelling units per acre, so a pretty low density. I think there are about 17 dwellings currently in that area at present. Again, in the 2010 master plan, this was all shown as green space. There's a pocket of neighborhood density residential, 3 to 6 units along Brownsville Road. Have not seen any kind of redevelopment of those areas, which do include some historic structures on Brownsville Road. I think taverns dating from when that was the main road between Charlottesville and the Shenandoah Valley. And there's some current language about limiting development in this area to the by right zoning. So throughout the workshops we've had this winter, we heard a lot about, we want to preserve the green space and limit new development along this corridor between Old Trail Drive and Sparrow Hill. Again, kind of, we don't want new development along here, but we also want to improve some connectivity to nearby schools and along the Route 250 corridor. We kind of broached the subject in February about, is this really the appropriate land use designation where there is development potential in this area? We didn't get a whole lot of support for it when we asked in February. But again, I think we're trying to recognize existing conditions, existing zoning in this area. We also did hear some suggestions about limiting outdoor lighting, visibility of development from this kind of rural scenic byway area. So there was support for a buffer on this area. And I think, you know, as far as development potential, like I think I'll jump into that in a minute, but this is an area that's already been contemplated as remaining fairly undeveloped. I think just trying to be transparent about the fact that this is shown as green space, which might not actually be what this could become in the future. And trying to make sure that expectation is clear with the community and in the master plan with these land use colors on this map. This is a kind of a low density, a transition rural area. The current roadways around there are all rural sections of Crozet Avenue and Route 250. There's not a whole lot of sidewalks or bike lanes in place. It's not really a place where high density development makes sense, given the distance from the centers and the current conditions in the area. And there are a number of stream buffers and preserved slopes on these properties currently. We have heard a lot about landscape buffers. We feel those are recommendations currently called for in the master plan, recommendations there are support for in the future. So I think what we've wanted to approach with you all was the potential of just updating the designation of these properties to the neighborhood density low, which is anywhere below 2 units per acre. It's more in line with that 1 to 1.5 R1 zoning, but really calling out the landscape buffers on 250 that we've heard about and on Crozet Avenue, explicitly showing where those should be, showing the stream buffers and these environmental features as parks and green systems, but calling out in more detail where potential development could potentially happen under the zoning that's currently there. Greenspace, the Parks and Green Systems designation does not provide any sort of guidance about residential development. It says there should not be any, and we would assume in that case it would probably go through the by right development if any new development happened in this area. So I think we want to bring that up to you all, just do a better job of spelling out where development could happen in this corridor and where it would be likely to happen under the current zoning. Not promoting an increase in the density or the development out here, just recognizing what is there and helping to establish that expectation with the community by making sure the land use map lines up with what could happen there. But alternative B would be retain this entire area as that green Parks and Green Systems designation we've had earlier on. So this is again a space where there is kind of some issues between the map that's in the plan, the text and the language in the plan about the density and the existing zoning, and then again what's currently there with the zoning. So this is more of this is really more so a cleanup item that staff's identified that we want to try to discuss with you all and just make sure we're managing expectations about what could happen in this area. So it's a little more wonky. It's a little bit more about land use versus zoning and managing those conflicts in the master plan. Not so much a growth potential. I think when we did the math, because of that, the 2010 plan had that pocket of neighborhood density, that yellow, the brighter yellow. It's basically the same potential dwelling density out here, just spread out over all these properties and more consistent with the existing zoning.